we really never spend a lot of time talking about that or thinking about that. But if you can imagine the vaginal tissue, the anal tissue, this is tissue that can certainly accommodate the vaginal tissue more so than the anal tissue, but can certainly accommodate some stretching and so forth, but there is too big. And yes, it's only about 2% of the population that might be in that outlier size range, but we just don't seem to talk about the fact. We seem to imply that bigger is better, and that's not necessarily the case because we're talking about some fairly serious tissue injury, potential tissue injury. So that's something to keep in mind. And I believe the question, did it ask something about pregnancy?
Yes, and does size matter in terms of pregnancy?
Okay. Theoretically, we'd have to say yes, because without getting into too much detail right now, pregnancy is the introduction of ejaculate that contains viable sperm that then seek out a viable egg. Most of that fertilization happens in the fallopian tubes. So you have the vaginal canal, which on average is about 4.5 inches long, even with sexual excitement. Then you have the cervical opening, which is very tiny. The uterus, the viable sperm have to travel the distance of the vaginal canal thus far. They have to make it through this tiny opening of the cervix. Then they have to travel the distance of the uterus, which is roughly the shape and size of a pear, an upside down pear. So they have to travel that length as well. And then after they leave the top of the uterus, they enter into the fallopian tubes. So if you just picture the pelvic region of a female, the fallopian tubes those end in the ovaries. And so if you picture how wide a female's pelvic girdle is, a couple inches on either side of that are the fallopian tubes, and the ejaculate containing the swimmer sperm has to travel all that way as well to fertilize the eggs. So the further you can get the ejaculate into the vaginal canal, theoretically, the more likely that sperm will be able to reach the egg because it'll have a shorter distance to travel.
Okay, so the last question that we have for today, I find very interesting. Why is makeup sex so much better than just everyday sex? Now, then again, I guess if you fight every day with your partner, then it may end up being everyday sex. But what would make makeup sex better than
Okay. And of course, we have to start out by saying that for everybody, it's not necessarily the case that makeup sex is better, and I think that's a good reason why right there, if you're fighting every day, then it's really not makeup sex anymore, it's just sex.
Yeah.
Generally, this has to do with the nervous system, and I'm going to try to keep this as
scientific minimum?
Yeah, I'll try to keep the science to a minimum. In essence, but I think it's important for y'all to know this and certainly keep this in mind for future questions that we have, because we will refer back to this several times. And if you are able to keep in mind what I'm about to talk about with regard to the nervous system, you can do things along the lines of sensing whether or not someone is lying to you, sensing whether or not someone's attracted to you. So we'll talk about these things in the future. But just to start, your nervous system has one center of control that excites you, and it's called the sympathetic division of the autonomic nervous system, for those of you who really want all the vocabulary. And it has another system that brings you back down to baseline, and that one's called the parasympathetic. So you can think of it as a parachute bringing your body, your physiology, your heartbeat, your respiration back down to baseline. So as you and I sit here right now, Jonathan, we're in parasympathetic. We're both, we're very relaxed.
You're assuming we're in parasympathetic.
You're in parasympathetic. I can tell by looking at you, which again I'll explain later, but we're probably in parasympathetic.
Okay.
Our eyes are not dilated heavily. Our heartbeat is fairly normal. We're relatively chilled out. So what's interesting to note about these two aspects of your nervous system is they're always fighting for control. So one of them really only has a majority of control over you at one time, and the other one has you at another time. During sex, they switch off. So during the initial parts of sexual excitement, we used to think it's that excitement system, the sympathetic. What we found is that it's actually parasympathetic for a little while, and I know that seems counterintuitive, but ramping up for sexual excitement, you just start to move into that excited nervous system, the sympathetic. So we like to say, as behavioral neuroscientists and as psychobiologists, that the sympathetic division, that excitement one, it's in charge of the 4 F's. So when you are feeling upset, emotional, you're in sympathetic or the excited nervous system. Flight, so that is when you're running from something, somebody, right, startled, or you feel like running from somebody. So if your boss is talking to you or somebody you don't care for is talking to you and you want to run, you're in sympathetic even though you can't run or you don't want to run because it's your boss talking to you.
Yeah.
Feeling, flight, fighting, obviously that's self-explanatory. And then the 4th F is mating. So sympathetic nervous system activity governs those 4. Did you figure that out?
Yeah,
Okay.
I caught that.
Governs those 4 F's. Fighting and feeling, those are generally involved when you have a fight with a loved one, with a significant other. So when you're fighting with a significant other, your sympathetic nervous system is aroused. Another really cool observation that we've made is that when you're aroused due to a fight, when you're aroused due to the fact that you're on the elliptical trainer at the gym, when you're aroused due to the fact that you just won the lottery, when you're aroused due to the fact that you just lost your job, your body knows nothing about the difference. It sees sexual excitement as it does winning the lottery, as it does showing up for class and finding out there's an exam you didn't know about, as it does getting married. I mean, all of these aspects of sympathetic nervous system, whether they're good stress or bad stress, the body sees them the same. So when you're fighting with your significant other, you've primed that sexual system. You're aroused. You have sympathetic arousal. And because you're in sympathetic arousal already, you've got a jump start on sexual excitement. The body generalizes those 2 things. And it's actually a phenomenon called misattribution, where your body misattributes that arousal. So you and I are fighting. My body's aroused in a bad way because we're fighting. And then my body then says, it makes a mistake and it misattributes that arousal to, oh, okay, well, I'm with this person and this person excites me. And keeping in mind that the female physiological system, it really takes about 28 minutes with interactive sex to get to a point where it can reach orgasm. And with the male system, we have varying estimates, but
30 seconds to 3.5 minutes. Yeah,
exactly. They're much shorter. So if you keep that in mind during that fight, that could be a jump start on that time it takes for that system to warm up to the point where it can reach orgasm.
So in other words, if for some reason or another, a woman is just not getting enough foreplay, they could always just go for a run just before sex.
Sure. I would recommend that over fighting anytime. The interesting thing though with your example is it won't be as effective. Because when you voluntarily put yourself into flight, which is exercise, the body, especially if you're a regular exerciser, the body knows, oh, this is that thing that we do every once in a while when we go to the gym. So it's a bit more voluntary, and your body's kind of in on that secret. So it'll send you to a level of functioning that is much more warmed up and ready for sex than you and I just hanging out, sitting here, watching TV or whatever. But really, the emotional stuff primes you more.
Okay. Well, that seems to be about all the time that we have for this week.
Okay.
As always, we encourage that you continue sending us your questions. Again, our email address is talksexwithdrs@gmail.com. That's all one word, talksexwithdrs@gmail.com. And again, I want to thank you for...
Well, thank you. I just really wanted to just take a minute and thank the people who wrote in with questions. We definitely appreciate it. And I think the main goal that we have in mind is to just answer your questions. So we really hope that you'll continue to write in and send those. We'll answer anything.